Good afternoon, all. Welcome to this refresher course on GST for beginners, and really glad to see so many youngsters on both the side, on the screen and off the screen. And thanks, Lalit Bhai Murtuzaji, for the efforts and the consent for this event for youngsters and the beginners for beginners to GST. And even today, it's pride and privilege for us that we have Rajesh Pandey sir and SK Rahman sir with us, along with the expert faculties. And today we have another initiative from WRC. Mainly, we can see nowadays the youngsters are shifting to unexplored areas, and one is a virtual CFO services. And with efforts of my colleague and dear friend C. Chintan Patel and his team, we are going to release a publication on virtual CFO service in this event. Thanks, Lalit Bhai, for choosing this event to inaugurate this publication. Superb efforts, Chintan Bhai. Thanks for the efforts. And I request Lalit Bhai to kindly address the participants. Lalit Bhai, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Anand. Chief guest for the day, Sri S.K. Rahmanji, Joint Secretary, GST Council. Guest of honor, Sri Rajesh Pandeji, Principal Additional Director General, Directorate of Revenue Intelligence, Mumbai. Expert speaker for the session, CA Pritam Maureji. My co-regional council members, Murtuza Bhai, Anand, Umesh ji, Chintan, and all my friends who have contributed in coming out with this publication. Participants, seniors and friends, on behalf of WIRC, I welcome all of you in this August gathering for refresher course on GST for beginners. We are very fortunate that today we have with us Sri S.K. Rahmanji and Sri Rajesh Pandeji. I would like to acknowledge here among the audience that, sir, at GST Council, the grievance cell which has been started, and we, ICAI, is contributing in this initiative of GST Council. This is a very welcome step, and we would request that if we can just increase the frequency of this grievance cell, I think so our professional members and the business community and large will benefit a lot. Sir, at WIRC, we have GST help desk on which till now we have clarified doubts and queries approximately 20,000, more than 20,000. So, sir, we at ICAI and at WIRC are trying our level best to ensure that our chartered accountants are very well updated on the subject, and at the same time we are able to ensure that the business community can comply with all the provisions and compliances of GST law. Sir, at ICAI we have been regularly giving recommendations to GST Council and Finance Ministry, and in future also we are having a think tank which regularly thinks on various aspects of the law, and we deliberate and submit it to the relevant officer. We will continue with the same in near future. As far as this program is concerned, let me tell you one thing. We chartered accountants have a very larger role to ensure that we update ourselves, and at the same time the business community and our clients can really comply with all the requirements of this law. All these refresher courses and seminars related to GST are designed with the same idea in mind, and this particular refresher course will really enable all of us looking at the bouquet of experts on the subject like Pritam Maureji, CA Bimal Jain ji, CA Sandeep Sachdeva ji, CA Chetan Oswal ji, Sri Ashok Nawal ji. we will really be fortunate to share a lots of ideas on this particular subject. Moving ahead, sir, we are taking the opportunity to launch with your gracious presence and hands a very apt publication of WIRC, which is Virtual CFO Services. We are always ensuring that whatever opportunities are there for professional brothers, we always try to come out with some or the other knowledge bank to share with all our members. I would really acknowledge and appreciate the efforts put in by my colleague in council, CA Chintan Patel, CA Vishal Doshi in absentia, and all the contributors, CA Sunil Pandey, CA Hardik Shah, CA Karan Rathi, CA Sunil Shah, and CA SM Ranga, and all the coordinators who have really helped in doing this, CA Vandana Dodia, CA Ashish Bakliwal, CA Rajesh Parmar, CA RC Jain, and CA Suyog Narvekar, who have ensured the smooth and efficient working leading to the speedy publishing of this particular guide. With this, I would like to share a couple of things with the participants today. WIRC a couple of months back had come out with a publication on GST audit and annual return, which is freely available on WIRC website. I would request that whoever is looking for some guidance or some clarification can visit on WIRC website. The publication has been created with the help and expertise of the experts on the subject. So we are really, and we are confident that the publication will be of utmost use to all of us. Friends, we have a live help desk to ensure that none of your queries or problems are left unresolved. Please take the benefit of the same. We have started with a mentorship assistance program, specially keeping in mind the growth of our younger generation. Do take benefit of the same. We have started with a research forum to enable and to enrich the knowledge of our members and ensure that the revolutionary ideas of our professional brothers and sisters can be really put to use for the whole profession. So whoever is interested to be part of the research forum, please write to us at wirc@ici.in. One more initiative which we are working as of now is women empowerment. We are listing a database of women who have been on leave because of sabbatical or some family commitments, and we will be hosting it on our WIRC website so that whoever office or whoever chartered accountant requires any service all across the India can really approach them and ensure that he can get their services. The idea is to bring them back to profession, and ICI can contribute to some extent in this initiative. With this, I once again welcome all of you and look forward for words of wisdom from Sri S.K. Rahmanji and Sri Rajesh Pandeyji. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Lalit Bhai. And as you have already mentioned, the most awaited publication we are going to inaugurate. And before the yes, and I request Lalit Bhai, Chintan Bhai, Umesh Bhai, Murtuza ji, and Honorable Pandey Sahab to kindly do the honors, and the team which was involved in this publication.
Mishra ji, show the picture.
Superb efforts, virtual CFO services.
Congratulations, Chintan Bhai, and all the expert who worked on this. Congratulations.
Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. It's the team effort of all the whole contributor teams
Yeah,
and
Chintan Bhai,
holders.
brief
Yes.
us about the publication.
Yes. Thank you so much, Anand Bhai. And first, my compliments to you for starting with this GST beginners series. I think you've done an excellent job as far as GST is concerned. And this virtual CFO is the one of the most important. If I talk about this publication, in my view, this is the only publication available in India or in the world which focuses only on virtual CFO service providers. And secondly, if I talk about these particular services, this is the new and one of the big opportunity which is in the line of all professionals. So if you're looking at insolvency, I will say it is much better than this one. The only thing is that we need to really eye for this. We need to have patience. We need to have experience to deal with these services. So CFO is generally a term which has been used with organization, and this is CFO service provider. So now in this book, we also coin one word, CSP. That is a CFO service provider. So CSP is a term, is a coin term which is going to be useful in the future. Next 10 years, next 20 years, next 30 years, this has a huge potential for all practicing CA to focus on this. So what we have done in these publications, it is not only about theoretical, it also talks about why CA is the base for these services. Second, how CA can start this practice. Third, which are the opportunities for CAs. Fourth, which are the tools available for this. Fifth, the most important is the case studies, practical case studies, practical more than 20 case studies which have been already solved by contributors have been part of these publications. And this publication is aimed to provide you not only understanding but also the practical insights. If you really want to set up practice, it will give you the tools, everything which is ready set for you. With your determination, you can really achieve this particular success. And I must say that this publication has come into the practical manner only and only with the support and contribution of the very die-hard contributors who are named as Sunil Pandeji, Hardik Shah, Karan Rathi, Sunil Shah, SM Rangaji. They work day in, day out. Second thing, what they have done best, they all are experienced in these services. They are providing these services, and from that own experience, they come out with these practical insights in the publication. Second thing, we have been having team of coordinators like Vanda Dodia and Ashish Bakliwal. They have also worked day nights along with the team of Rajesh Parmar, RC Jain, and Suel Narkarji. They all have ensured that we should come out with publications, and the whole team is very much sure that this is going to be one of the most important new opportunity for all practicing CA throughout the country. So my thanks to the chairman of WRC, because he has been kind enough to give his go ahead, and he was very much fascinated to have these kind of publications for the WRC members. And my thanks to whole committee of WRC with my all team members, all council colleagues. They are always there to ensure that these kind of things will come for IC members.
Thank you very much, dear Chintan Bhai and the whole team. It's really, the book is very tempting, and Lalit Bhai just confirmed me that all the participants and all the members can take benefit of this publication. Please do visit our website, WRC website, and make the best use of this publication. And superb efforts, and always Chintan Bhai is known for exploring some new things, and this time also have come up with this new kind of publication, virtual CFO services. And now we have a speaker with us, Rajesh Pandeji. He is BE Mechanical and Masters in Trade Related Laws and WTO. He is IRS from 1990 batch. Present assignment, he is Principal Additional Director General, Directorate of Revenue Intelligence, Mumbai. And about his previous assignments, he was Additional Director General, Director General of GST Intelligence at Pune, also Commissioner Central Excise Pune 3, and Commissioner Appeals Pune. Rajesh sir has worked in Enforcement Directorate as well as Central Bureau of Narcotics, as well as Directorate General of GST Intelligence, Customs, and Central Excise Formation in Mumbai, Pune, and Ahmedabad. So we have highly resourceful person. He has delivered sessions almost at each and every professional platform and commercial bodies, trade organizations. He is a master trainer for GST and participated in number of international meetings and has contributed articles in various publications. So it's pride, privilege, and honor for all of us to have Rajesh Pandey sir here. Pandey sir, over to you. Kindly guide us.
Thank you, Anandji. I also thank Sri Lalit Bajaj and my friend Pritam Maure, who were kind enough to invite me to this session. As I was telling before the start of this training session to my co-panelists that even though I am presently working in the customs vertical of the Central Board of Indirect Taxes and Customs, that too on the enforcement side, but my attachment to GST, since it was a baby which was born, and we were in Pune trying to make the trade as comfortable as possible during this major transformation of indirect tax. So much of efforts we had made with the professional institutes like Chartered Accountant Institute or with the industry or trade associations. So all that was really a very enriching experience in terms of knowing the trade and industry, and that was something where we also learned a lot. Then I could take some of those learnings to the GST Law Review Committee, which was formed in November 2017 by the GST Council. I was a member of the GST Law Review Committee, and some of the recommendations which we had given are still being implemented, and it is really heartening to see that when the decisions of the GST Council pertaining to specific sectors are announced at the end of the day of the GST Council meeting, some of the recommendations, some of the topics, some of the problems of the industry which we had discussed are accepted and approved by the GST Council. So it's a very satisfying feeling that time. And GST, as you all know, is still, even though we are already in the 4th year of its implementation, still a work in progress. But one has to agree that whatever changes have been made in last 3 years have been for making the whole GST process more friendly, removing the problems, and to meet certain challenges which have been thrown up by certain unscrupulous taxpayers. So all along this journey has been where the trade and industry, and that is the taxpayers, and the professionals like you all have been working hand in hand with the governments, both states government and central government and the GST Council. So this has been a unique partnership where all the stakeholders have been contributing, and there cannot be any doubt that unless all the 3 legs are firm, the taxpayer, the tax consultant, and the tax officer, the GST experiment in India will not succeed. The only way for this GST to succeed, to further improve, is for all the 3 legs to strongly contribute for continuous improvement of GST. We are having a lot of issues still remaining unresolved. There have been talks of too many tax rates of GST, but there is also a line of thinking that stability of the tax rates is also important, because continuously changing tax rates also dislocates the planning which the trade and industry has done based on a particular level of tax rates. So that is another view which has to be factored in. Then we have, especially after the pandemic, an enhanced focus on Make in India. So some rates probably need revision to give emphasis to this priority of the government of Make in India. And also, as it was mentioned by your institute, is doing a pioneering work in terms of audit. So this, when it comes to the statutory audit by the tax officers on the GST side, they are also, because we will be working in the soft copies, unlike the pre-GST era, completely on those. So the capabilities of the audit officers of the department also need to be enhanced. Otherwise, it will be a regressive step if documents are asked in physical form. So that is one area where from the department side, some capacity building is required. And then there are certain pending issues where, due to various pulls and pressures which could not be resolved between states and center, there are some anomalies, if I can say, that still we have an advanced ruling mechanism which has been rather not very effective. The advanced ruling, so far as the trade and industry is concerned, has been a disappointing experience. And so this is something which needs a structural change, in the sense that advanced ruling should be such that it brings finality to the issue, instead of, even in many instances, the advanced rulings have varied from state to state. So that is one area. Then we have so many writ petitions being filed in high courts because there is no GST council. So we need to quickly sort out the formation of GST tribunals. So these GST tribunals have to be sorted out, and the constitution of the GST tribunal has to be decided in line with what the judicial pronouncements have been. There are judgments. There is a judgment of Madras High Court. So with all that, now the structure of GST tribunal has to be thought again, and it should be established fast. Then there is always, from the trade and industry side, that compliances are too many. So this also is a matter of thinking, a matter for agenda item for the GST Council to think. There have been some attempts by way of GSTN providing some simpler solutions, but still, in terms of frequency of compliance, there is still probably some scope for reducing the compliance burden for genuine tax players, especially the SMSE sector, so MSME sector. So that part is something which is still a work in progress. Those are still to be attended to. But overall, this act, as we have seen in last 3 years, this law has been a law where it is still compliance driven. The legal issues, since it is initial years, are still not reached that level where they can be settled by the High Court decisions or Supreme Court decisions. So those will be happening in coming 3, 4, 5 years, that some of the major contentious provisions of law will be tested in High Courts and Supreme Court. So before that, the entire focus has been on compliance. We have regular deferment of return filing dates, and the formats of the returns have also been announced late. So all that is adding to a lot of compliance challenges, and there I see a major role for the chartered accountants, that they have a role in they have a major role in ensuring that the taxpayers are guided properly. They are encouraged towards compliance. And as I am in an enforcement function, I must also say that the chartered accountants also have a role in ensuring that the persons who are evading the tax, whether by way of fake invoice proliferation or by any other modus operandi, that is also discouraged. As professionals, you will have some code of ethics, your some kind of responsibilities, but still, ultimately, as GST practitioners, our responsibility towards ensuring a fair implementation of law for proper collection of tax is also important. And as I was telling a professional CA earlier this week only, that whatever is evaded by way of proper modus operandi based tax evasion, whether it is fake GST invoices, is something which is paid by honest taxpayers. There is no other kitty available with the government to take that hit. It is honest taxpayers who are paying that tax, which is actually being stolen by the racketeers who are indulging in trading of fake invoices. So, and this is not a small provision. This is not a small problem. Last year, the figures which were collated were already fake invoices of 1,25,000 crore was something which was detected. So, and detection is always a small percentage of what is the reality. So that way, it's a huge challenge. And as taxpayers, as professionals, it is responsibility of both the tax practitioners and the tax officers to contribute in controlling this menace. So this is something where the participants of this training course I would request them to focus, and as citizens of India also try to contribute that we have a clean taxation system, and whatever suggestions they can also give for improvement, they should continuously give. This WIRC has been a very active chapter right from the days of pre-GST. And if I remember that GST came in 2017, before that itself, there were a number of seminars, there were a number of sessions which were held, and a lot of preparation was made in training the CAs for proper implementation of GST, and in those days probably understanding the concepts, the structure of GST, how it will be implemented. So all that has been very proactive and pioneering work which has been going on. So I see that we have a very active this regional chapter. So I wish WIRC all the very best, and this collection of suggestions, the help desk, all these are great initiatives. This book which has been launched today, Virtual CFO Services, this itself is a landmark work. We still have to understand that what exactly is the content, but as Chintanji described, and he described it with such passion that it is something which is futuristic. So such good work coming from WIRC, and this training also, I'm sure, with faculties, the names I had gone through. So all the participants will be immensely benefited. I wish this training sessions all the very best, and I once again thank WIRC for giving me this opportunity to talk to you all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pandey sir. Thanks for the words of wisdom, addressing all the participants, motivating us, and thanks for inspiring us and appreciating our efforts in making all the people, trade people as well as professionals aware about GST. I remember it's our CA day, on the CA day itself, in 2017 GST was introduced, and on 1st July 2018 from our honorable Prime Minister Modi ji, when GST was celebrating its first anniversary, on the same day we received an appreciation letter from honorable PM Modi sir. I was chairman of Pune branch that year, and he appreciated the role of chartered accountant fraternity, ICI, and all its regional councils in arranging thousands of seminars and various courses, and making everyone aware about GST. Thanks, sir, for your efforts and for your precious time. And we have another expert, GST, from our council, our very own Umesh Bhai Sharma ji. I request Umesh Bhai to propose a formal vote of thanks as well as introduce the next faculty. Umesh Bhai, over
Yes,
to you.
yes. Thank you, Anandji, and all participants. Today is the GST beginners course, and after listening to Rajesh Pandey sir, you must have known that what was GST earlier, what is the GST today, and what will be the futuristic GST. And Pandey sir is the correct person to give the reference of GST. GST kal, aaj aur kal. So, sir, thanks for giving the introduction of the journey of the GST, the roles and is in the GST era, and we are always there, law-abiding citizens of India, and at WIRC and at our practice, we will go hand to hand with your vision, and we are doing that, the task of audit and compliance. Sir, what you have told that in future the new e-invoicing pattern is coming up, so the bogus invoicing and all these things will be settled down, and it will be a clean GST. We also hope that, and your vision will be done by us. Sir, at the end, I want to thank you by sharing one Hindi line, a quote. मुसीबतें तो बहुत है, इरादे भी नेक है, पर कोई हताश होकर बिखर गया और कोई संघर्ष करके निखर गया. तो सर, आपकी लाइफ का जो हमने देखा है, you are always shining in all the fields, now in the intelligence, earlier in the GST, and this is the one of the best example for future chartered accountants who want to practice in GST, because it's a beginner's course. So thank you, sir, for sparing your time and giving the words of wisdom. We also thank our RCM Chintan Patel for the wonderful work of the virtual CFO services book, and all the team members of Chintan Patel and the contributors to the book. And we also thank Rahmanji, who is there in, but we are not able to listen to him due to some issues, technical issues, but his wishes are always there with us. So thank you, Pandey sir. And now we will move toward the next session. And we also thank chairman and secretary and all office bearers for organizing this wonderful opening session. So now let me introduce our speaker, Pritam Maure sir. Start this course, we have different sessions, and IPL is going on. तो ये जो आज की जो हम देख रहे हैं, ये पहली मैच है हमारे जीएसटी के बिगिनर्स की, और मैं पहले भी कई बार कह चुका हूँ, क्योंकि सर का जब मैं बायोडाटा पढ़ता हूँ, प्रीतम सर का, तो उन्होंने बड़े इससे लिखा है कि 200+ लेक्चर्स, तो सर ने डबल सेंचुरी मारी है, एंड ही इज द ओपनिंग बैट्समैन फॉर टुडे, एंड 15+ books sir has written, so that is the man of the series award to sir. और सर के बारे में मैं फिर से वही कहना चाहूंगा जो हर बार कहता हूँ, उनका शब्द है प्रीतम. प्रीतम मीन्स लवेबल पर्सन, एंड हिज लव टुवर्ड जीएसटी इज सच दैट ही इज देयर टू हेल्प अस at WIRC to give the lectures, and whenever we call him, he is happily there. So thanks sir for sharing your knowledge, your words of wisdom, and always smiling person. So ऐसा ही प्यार बना रहे सर आपके साथ, and let's all the participants enjoy the lovable session of Pritam Maure sir. Over to you sir. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks Sharma ji. आपका introduction यानी कि literally we always feel very honored to be introduced by you because you yourself are a very knowledgeable person when it comes to GST. We regularly follow you on various platforms, be it YouTube or whether it is your articles. So friends, at the outset, I would like to thank Anand Zokotia, who has given us this wonderful opportunity, Bajaj sir, who was, I would say, a driving force for the session. And also I would like to thank Pandey sir, who has set the tone for the day. I think he has very validly and very rightly pointed out so many critical issues, and just within 10 to 15 minutes of his precious time, he was able to highlight that right from the inception till now, how GST has progressed. And friends, you would have seen what Pandey sir has mentioned. He specifically mentioned that during the birth or during the transition time, there were different issues. But as we are progressing ahead in GST, different types of issues are going to arise, because in the initial time when the birth was being taken place, that time we were trying to decode GST law. Now as we progressed, practically we wanted to understand what are the compliance related issues, and that's what we are doing in the last 3 years or 3.5 years time. And as we are progressing now further in the 4th and 5th year, the more and more issues which are going to come would be with respect to the interpretation. So initially it was about implementation, subsequently it was about compliances, and going forward it would be about interpretation of various issues or various terms in GST, and that's where today's session becomes very much important. Friends, I would like to thank Rahman sir also, who is also today participating in the session. So sir, we would like to hear your also thoughts after maybe some couple of minutes. So friends, let's get started. So as we start our discussion, I think let's first understand, because many one of you would think, what is the reason, what is the rationale for us to basically understand the Constitution of India? Because when we are talking about a beginner course for GST, is it necessary, is it important for all of us to actually understand Constitution, because it is not directly related to GST? But friend, let us highlight to you that if you have gone through the recent case laws, be it the Tran related case laws, which has, I think, brand equity case, be it all other case laws, talk about the Shin Golden case, the Reliance judgment, the Safari Retreat judgment, I think all the judgment right now are talking about some or other constitutional provision. Even the Calcutta Club talked about the deemed sale concept, correct, and the mutuality. And that's the reason we thought as WRC, why not to initiate the discussion on this particular course with Constitution of India and how it is related to GST. So what we are going to do today, friends, in the next few couple of 1.5 hours time, we will understand the very brief background about the Constitution. Then we will discuss about the present key issues, and then we are going to discuss about how in future GST is going to evolve and what are the challenges we are going to face. First, let's get started with Constitution. As all of you are aware that Constitution is also referred as the basic law of the country, correct? It is also referred as basic law. So what it means, it is a law for the governance of the country, but at the end of the day, it is a law. And second most important thing is, it's a law under which all the laws are made, and that's where one can say it's a Gangotri, particularly for the various laws. Friends, as you will be able to understand that Constitution is a concept which originated practically 800 years back, correct? More than 800 years back. And you would have heard this term known as Magna Carta. So how this term originated, basically, it was a great charter of liberties, and this was a peace treaty which was signed by the then King of England, King John, with the residents. And in this Magna Carta, there were certain rights which were given to the citizens of that country. At the same time, it was mentioned that everybody in the country would be subject to certain principles of law, including the king. This was the very first time that everybody was subjected to a common law, correct? And that's how, after over the period of 800 years, in the last 800 years, as we became more civilized, most of the country borrowed liberally from the Charter of Liberties. They introduced various Bill of Rights in their own country, and that's how Constitution evolved to become a system basically for governance of the country. Now, the first question which will come to your mind would be, does it mean that each and every country in the planet have a constitution? Friends, not each and every country, I would say, is as fortunate as we are, because there are quite a few countries who are not having constitution, be it UK, Israel, New Zealand, or Canada, or even for that matter, Saudi Arabia. These countries do not have their own constitution. But at the same time, not having constitution, what it means, that we need to understand. Friends, if you don't have a constitution in place, practically in that country, nothing is unconstitutional. So what it means? It means tomorrow in UK, if the parliament assumes all the power, if it says that the court will be dismantled, there would not be any court whatsoever in the country of UK, then it cannot be held as unconstitutional. And that's the biggest impact. And that's the reason even UK, like a country which ruled us, correct? And right now they are not having a constitution. They are also right now saying that should we have a constitution in place? Otherwise, there is no power, there is no check or balances against the parliamentary powers. And that's the reason, friends, having a constitution is one of the best thing for any country. Now, the next question which will come to your mind would be, okay, we have a constitution, but how it was made? Friends, I think all of you who are participating today in today's GST beginners course, I think all of you are aware that GST was made by around 20 states and the 8 union territories, correct? All the authorities came together and they drafted the GST law. Now, when in 1946, this discussion started that the then occupying forces were supposed to leave our country and our country was to be declared as independent country. That time, there were around 600 states in the country. And all these 600 states, they came together and they nominated around 292 members. And these 292 members were known as a constituent assembly. And please note, this constituent assembly had like say a few of the biggest names in that particular era or time. So be it the chairman, Dr. Rajendra Prasad, be it the father of the Indian Constitution, Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar, be it Mr. Nehru, be it Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, or Syama Prasad Mukherjee. So all the gems, all the big luminaries were part of that constituent assembly. And these 292 members, they started the process of drafting constitution on 9th December 1946. And after that, the first question which they came to their mind was basically what constitution we are going to draft. Are we going to draft the constitution for the center, or we are going to draft the constitution for the states separately, or is it going to be one? That was the very first question they had there in their mind. Now, why this question? Because there are few countries in the world wherein there is a separate constitution for the country and separate constitution for the states. I think all of you are aware that in the initial days, the Constitution of India which was drawn was for the entire country except one particular state, that is Jammu and Kashmir. However, after 5th of August 2019, right now one can say that there is one constitution for the entire country. So one can say one nation, one constitution is a reality right now. However, earlier it was not the same because there was a constitution for the country and there was a separate constitution for the state of Jammu and Kashmir. Friends, as we were drafting the constitution, and briefly we'll understand how we drafted the constitution. Before Constitution of India was put in place, there were around 8 Government of India Act. And what was this Government of India Act? These were basically the act which were passed by the UK Parliament, correct? And the very first act was passed after the 1857 mutiny, and India was declared as a nation. After that, in 1919, it was said that Indians could also participate in the Government of India's function. And these Government of India's Act were passed. Around 75% of the constitutional provision we have borrowed from the Government of India Act. Then the second important thing is there are various other countries' constitution also be referred, because all the Constituent Assembly members said that we should not start from scratch. What we should do as a country, because we have very limited time and we want to become independent as soon as possible, and we need to have a constitution in place as early as possible, they referred to various constitutions across the world and they borrowed some of the best provisions which were prevailing in that particular time. So be it the preamble fundamental right concept from USA, be it the concept of parliament and the process of writs from UK, be it the concept of directive principles from Ireland. So all these principles we borrowed from various other countries. And friends, we are going to discuss few of the important principles also, for example, directive principles in the next couple of slides. So that's how we prepared our constitution. Now, apart from drafting the constitution, the Constituent Assembly also had to think through about what should be the system of the country. Now, what is meant by system? Friends, I think all of you are aware that some of the countries have a system called as unitary system of governance of the country. Somebody has a federal system, correct? Now, and somebody has a confederal system. So what are these systems? So basically, smaller countries, correct? Smaller countries are the countries who want to have a power at a central level. There, typically the system is referred as a unitary system. So in those countries, all the power lies with the central government. Every decision is practically taken by the central government, and that is known as a unitary system. So practically India could have gone ahead with unitary system, or they could have gone ahead with federal system, wherein the power is lying with both central and state, something like USA. Or we could have gone ahead with a co-federal system, confederal system, something like EU. But India, being very unique, what we did, we chose a quasi-federal system, wherein our constitution is said to be federal in form but unitary in spirit. And friends, this kind of a quasi-federal structure one can also understand from even referring to the GST law. Because when you look at the GST law, you would be able to understand that while the intrastate transactions are under the ambit of central and state, when it comes to interstate, the entire power is available with the central government. We will discuss about the same, but in the next few slides. Now, friends, as we discussed that the Constituent Assembly member started working on the constitution drafting, and they took around 3 years. So you will say, what is the achievement there? Friends, please note, a country like Pakistan took more than 27 years, and a country like UK, even right now, they are struggling. And with that context, if you look at that, we just within 3 years time, we were able to draft our own constitution. It is also said that our constitution is the longest constitution in the entire world. Correct? It is not declared by the United Nations as the longest constitution, but it is actually a longest constitution. When you compare that with other constitution, you will be able to understand a country like USA, their constitution is just worded around 5,000 words, but our constitution is more than 1,45,000 words. That is more than 30 times larger or bigger. Additionally, friends, in the last 230 years, the USA constitution got amended only for 27 times, whereas our own constitution within just 70 years time, it got amended 104 times. Does it mean that we are regularly amending the constitution and it is not good? Certainly that is not the case, friends. Rather, if we are trying to amend the constitution, it only indicates that we are trying to make the constitution relevant for the current times. And that's the important aspect, that we are very much aware about the fact that the constitution is an evolving document. It is not a stagnant document. So when you have a constitution for the country, what it means? So as a country, what it means for us? One, there is a basic law or fundamental law in the country, correct? So if there is anything which is against the constitution, you can hold it as unconstitutional. Second, it can be a detailed constitution or it can be lengthy. As we discussed, ours is a lengthy constitution. Third important aspect is that each and every organ, including the GST Council, owes their origin to the Constitution. Please note that not only Constitution bestows the power on all the organs of the government, but it also outlines certain limitations, and we are going to discuss about those limitations in the next couple of slides. Because if any organ is going beyond the power which are being given by the Constitution, then certainly one can say that it is unconstitutional in nature. Additionally, friends, we need to understand that all the power, including the power to levy tax, emerges from the Constitution, and all those articles which are relevant for the discussion, be it Article 265, be it Article 246A, we are going to have a detailed discussions on the same. Friends, as we discussed that once a particular country has a constitution, particularly like India, there is no debate now as to who is supreme, because in UK, as we discussed, the parliament is supreme. Because if parliament tomorrow in UK says that we want to do away with judiciary, nobody in the judiciary can do anything, correct? In USA, judiciary is supreme. You cannot directly or indirectly overrule any judgment of the judiciary in USA, correct? But in India, who is supreme? As we discussed, in India, it is the constitution which is supreme. So friends, naturally, you will have a question in your mind, okay, in India, GST, in India, constitution is supreme, but in GST, who is supreme? Because you would have seen that since the day GST was introduced, you would have seen that sometime there is something which is said by the GST Council in the press release, which does not appear to be in line with the GST Act. Sometimes the provisions in the GST rules are not in tune with the GST Act. Sometimes there are some circulars or clarification which are issued by CBSE or the state authorities, which are not in tune with the rules or act, correct? And sometimes the GSTN, that is the portal wherein we file the return, it has some unique provisions, it has some unique restrictions for which there is no legal backing. For example, when it comes to GST law, I think all of you are aware, as far as CGST is concerned, the CGST law is applicable throughout India, and there is only one CGST Act, correct? It is not state level act, it is a central level act, central GST law. It is a central level act. Now, when it comes to utilization of credit, that is CGST credit of Maharashtra for your other unit in say Gujarat, is it possible for any one of you to utilize the CGST credit of Maharashtra for CGST credit of say of Gujarat? I am not talking about state level credit, that is HGST. I am only talking about CGST credit. If you look at the law, if you look at the various definition, including definition of input tax, you'll be surprised to know there is no such restriction in the act or rules. However, when you go to the portal, you would have realized that the CGST credit, you cannot, from one state, you cannot transfer to other state for utilization purposes, correct? So that is something which is put as a restriction by GSTN, and that's where sometimes some people wonder who is supreme in GST. Friends, we'll discuss about that particular aspect, but after a couple of more slides. Let's get started. Friends, whenever we talk about constitution, I think many one of you, or whatever discussion we had with few of the people in the past, what we have realized that almost many people understand the constitution only with respect to certain limited articles, and that's the reason many of the time we are unable to understand the entire context of the constitution, and that's where it is more than important for all of us to understand the overview or the context of the entire constitution. So friend, there are more than 450 articles in the Constitution of India. Although if you go serial number wise, it is only 395, but because there are various articles such as 246A, 269A, correct? Because of that, the number of articles is more than 450. All these articles are split into 22 parts, and the most important part for us as a tax professionals is basically part 11 and part 12, wherein the taxes is covered. At the same time, part 3, wherein fundamental rights are covered. I think all of you are aware, friend, that there are 12 schedules attached to the Constitution. The 7th schedule was a very much regularly referred schedule in the pre-GST era, because there were 3 lists in the 7th schedule. The list 1 was referred to be as a union or central list, wherein all the power was given to the central government, to including the power to tax. Similarly, list 2 gave the power to the state government, and there were around 66 items in the list 2, and there were around 97 items in the list 1. And then there was list 3, which was known as a concurrent list, and there were around 47 items in the list 3. Please note, this list 3 did not have any taxing powers per se. It was only there were certain mentions of fees, but per se there was no taxing entry under list 3. So what it means, before GST was introduced, either the power was with the central government or with the state government. That is, the power was mutually exclusive. However, after introduction of GST, I think all of you are aware that the power is right now not mutually inclusive, but it is said to be a concurrent or simultaneous power. We will discuss about the same, but after a couple of slides. So friends, let's get started. Friends, if you have a look at the Constitution, you'll be able to understand that the Constitution starts with preamble. Preamble is nothing but the golden goal statement which the Constitution makers or the Constituent Assembly drafted for us. It is just a half-page document, but it highlights what are the golden goals to be achieved by the Constitution. And friends, in the last couple of years, if you go through the various Supreme Court judgments, you'll be able to understand that the Supreme Court now more often they are referring to the preamble very regularly. And what is the reason? One of the reason is that preamble it is said is outlining the objective what the Constitution makers had in mind. And that's the reason, friends, a Constitution had a preamble, and that is being referred right now even after 70 years, is one of the brilliant fact which we need to keep in mind. And why we are highlighting this? Because friends, to some extent, when GST was drafted, we believe similar kind of preamble was not there, and that's the reason we are right now not having right golden goals. We are not having right goal post, and that's the reason all the changes which you are finding in the current times, I think almost all the changes are being driven, or all the changes are being made in the GST law for quantitative growth purposes. Quantitative growth purposes means looking at the tax revenue numbers. If the tax revenue is going down, there are certain changes being proposed. For example, be it Rule 36(4), be it Rule 86A, correct? All those kind of changes, including e-invoicing, to some extent, it is driven by the revenue needs. But at the same time, friends, we need to understand that when we are talking about GST law and its growth in India, we need to not only keep in mind the quantitative growth of GST, but we also need to give equal importance to qualitative growth of GST also, but which is right now not happening. We hope that in days to come, in years to come, even qualitative growth is rightly given due importance. Friends, then the Constitution starts with Article 1. After that, there are 3 most important articles, that is Article 14, which talks about equality, Article 19, which talks about certain freedoms, including freedom of expression, freedom to write or right to carry on business, and Article 21 talks about life and liberties. These three are said to be the 3 most important fundamental rights, correct? They are referred as golden triangle when it comes to the most important fundamental rights. Friends, what is the importance of fundamental rights? If your fundamental rights are violated, under Article 32 subclause 2, you can directly approach the Supreme Court, correct? And even because of Article 13, any law which is made in derogation of fundamental rights can be held as null and void. And that's the importance of the fundamental rights. Friend, apart from fundamental rights, there are also few constitutional rights which the citizens of the country have, including the right to property. Friends, I think all of you are aware that one of the fundamental rights which all of us had was covered under Article 19(1) subclause F, which was known as right to property. That fundamental right was shifted from the fundamental right to the constitutional right by way of Article 300A. We are going to discuss about that also, but after a couple of slides. Friend, Article 36 to 51 deals with some of the directive principles of state policy. So when the constitution was being drafted in the initial days, that time the constitution makers were very much aware that they cannot have the best constitution being implemented in the country. So what they said, that there would be certain things, for example, right to education, right to livelihoods, correct? All those rights also they had in mind, but they knew that the state government do not have right now the enough money and power to implement those rights. And that's the reason they said that these are the directive principles, means the future state government, whenever they are drafting any policy, they need to have this in their mind, or they need to have this kind of a framework in their mind. And that's where they introduced the Article 36 to 51. They are directive principles. If directive principles are not fulfilled, you cannot approach the court the way you can do if your fundamental rights are violated, correct? But it was a very amazing concept. Again, I would like to highlight that this kind of a concept, that is some directive principles, should have also been there in the GST law. Right now, when the GST law was introduced, these kind of directive principles were not set, and that's the reason, as we discussed, that almost all the changes, many of the changes are being driven because of the revenue needs rather than because of the qualitative needs of GST. Friend, then there are some other articles also, be it Article 51, which talks about fundamental duties, Article 131, which talks about the fact that if there is any dispute between the central and state government, then the Supreme Court has the original jurisdiction. Friends, under the Article 279A, I think all of you are aware that there is a concept of dispute resolution. If there is any dispute between central and state, if there is a dispute resolution authority which is being formed by the GST Council, then practically that authority will have a jurisdiction. But because there is no such kind of a mechanism which is being placed right now in the GST Council, if there is any dispute between the central and state, the Supreme Court will have its own jurisdiction under Article 131. Then I think all of you are aware, friends, Article 141, which talks about the fact that if Supreme Court delivers a particular judgment, it is applicable throughout India. Then Article 226 talks about writ petitions. I think all of you are aware that under Article 226, you can submit a writ petition before a particular high court. Friend, then there are few other important articles, be it Article 245, 246, or 248 and 254. These are the articles, particularly three articles, 246, 248, and 254. These are the articles which are relevant for the old timers, that is for the excise and VAT laws, correct? When it comes to GST, the most important articles are Article 246A, 269A, 279A. These are the most important articles. Obviously, there are a few other articles also which we are going to discuss as we progress further. Even there is one important article known as Article 366. I think all of you are aware that you can refer various definitions which are there under the GST law under this particular article, that is Article 366. So let's get started, friend. Now we had an overview of all the articles or key articles under the Constitution of India. Friends, as we discussed, that the power to levy tax originates from the Constitution, and in this regard, the most important article is Article 265U, correct? And this Article 265U is a very brief. It's one of the most brief or smallest article in the entire Constitution. It is just 12 words long, and what it says, no tax. It is just 12 words long, and it says no tax shall be levied or collected except by authority of law. A very simple article, correct? But please note that it is highlighting some of the most important ingredients of a tax law. What it says, that you cannot collect, that is no tax, be it direct or indirect, that is no tax can be collected or levied except by authority of law. So friends, please note that this article is not having any explanation. It doesn't have any proviso or subclauses, and that's the reason many a time this article regularly gets debated, correct? Because somebody will always question whether the government has power to levy dual taxes or double taxes. whether under this article you have power to introduce retrospective taxes, correct? Because this article, if you read, it is not giving any bar per se. It is not restricting the government to even doubly tax a transaction. So there is no restriction on the government. What is putting as a restriction? It only says no tax shall be levied or collected except by authority of law. Means there should be authority of law. Now authority of law means two authorities. One, constitutionally it should be permissible, and second, there has to be appropriate law under which you are levying a tax, correct? Additionally, I would say also one important aspect we should keep in mind, that the law cannot be or should not be implemented by way of notifications or circular. Appropriate power has to originate from the fundamentals or the charging section or the key provisions of the law. That is also one important point which we need to keep in mind. Friends, we need to keep in mind that many a time certain provisions or certain taxes are sometimes being levied by way of notifications. And I think all of you are aware, when it comes to GST, recently after 1st April 2019, the real estate sector was put under a different tax scheme. In that regard, there were certain notifications which were issued. And one of the notifications talked about the fact that first, if you are selling a flat as a developer, you need to include the cost of the land, and then after that 1/3 deduction would be given to you when you are calculating the rate of tax. So friends, the first and foremost point which will come to your mind would be whether by way of notifications or circular can you levy tax on the land component, correct? Indirectly, which is not permissible, because by authority of law means the charging section of that particular act has to give you authority to levy a tax. If there is no authority particularly, can tax be levied? Similarly, whether by way of rulings, because by way of advance ruling also you would have seen many a times some transactions which do not appear to be taxable, such as a director remuneration, that is a director who is employee of the company. I think all of you are aware, on the employee remuneration there is no GST, but there were few contrary advance ruling wherein it was said that even on employee director remuneration the GST would be payable under reverse charge. So practically, friend, the question comes, then is it under authority of law? And in our view, certainly it is not under the authority of law. Friends, as we discussed, this article is very brief, that is article 265U. So the question which the people have asked to the Supreme Court is basically, is there a power which is available with the government to levy taxes retrospectively? Because the article is only saying that no tax shall be levied or collected except by authority of law. So can the authority be introduced retrospectively? The answer to that question is yes. The government can also retrospectively tax a transaction. And in this regard, please note that retrospective taxation is permissible, but obviously it has to be within certain limits. It should not be excessive or very harsh. If it is that, so certainly you can challenge it under the constitutional provision. Additionally, friends, please note there are quite a few judgments wherein the Supreme Court has regularly said that there is nothing in the article 265U from wherein one can spin out the constitutional vice called as double taxation. Means what? There is no restriction which is placed under article 265U wherein you can say that you cannot tax the same transaction twice. So there is no restriction of this kind of which is placed under article 265U. But friends, please note, if there is no double taxation which is restricted under the article, but does that mean that you can levy taxes triply on a particular transaction? Can you levy 3 taxes on the same transaction? All of you will say that after GST, is this kind of a scenario possible also? So friends, when you look at real estate transaction, you will be able to understand that real estate is a sector which is being triply taxed. How it is triply taxed? I think all of you are aware that if the property prices, let us assume, is 75 lakh rupees in Pune, on that particular flat, you are expected to pay a GST at the rate of 5% on the output side. So the developer is charging you 5%. But at the same time, the developer cannot claim input tax credit. And that's where he will be losing around 8% of input tax credit, which he will add in the cost of the flat, correct? So 5% on the output side, 8% on the input side. So the total amount would be around 13%. But is it enough? Certainly not. Additionally, there is also one amount of tax called as stamp duty, correct? And how much that is? Around 6 to 7%. Obviously, it has been reduced in the last couple of months because of Corona. But assume that it is 7%. Practically, that means when somebody that is a citizen of the country want to buy a flat, right now he is liable to make payment of 20% of taxes, correct? And that's the sad part in GST, that real estate, which is an investment avenue, can you charge it at the rate of 20%? Because all of you will say that the constitution makers have never said that you cannot tax it triply. But friends, please note that they also consider equality. because a human being will typically invest his money either in the gold or in real estate. And you would have seen that in the last couple of days, the gold prices have increased to more than 50,000 plus. And what is the reason? Because people are finding it better to invest in gold because the tax rate on gold is only 3%, whereas indirectly the sector like real estate, you are paying more than 20% on taxes. And that's the reason, friends, we need to understand that can we under the constitution even challenge under the article 14, can we say that certain sectors are given more benefits, such as gold sector, vis-a-vis a sector which is more essential or relevant, that is the real estate sector. And we will discuss about the same, but in the next couple of slides. Friends, as we progress further, I think all of you are aware that in the initial days when the constitution was made, the Constituent Assembly gave a mutually exclusive power. What is meant by mutually exclusive power? It means the central government had a separate power. At the same time, state government had separate power. Central government had power to levy excise and service tax, and state government had power to levy excise duty on liquor and sale tax on or VAT on various other goods. So friends, why this power was mutually exclusive in the initial days? Because as we discussed, more than 600 states came together to form a nation called as Bharat or India. In those initial days, the constitution makers, they were very vigilant and very smart. They thought that in the initial days, let us not mix the revenues of the center or state, because if the revenues are mixed, if the income is mixed, naturally there is likely to be conflict. And that's why they said, let us have the revenues separate. Let the central government earn its own set of revenue, let the state government earn its own set of revenue, correct? And that's the reason they ensured that the power to tax is separate, it is mutually exclusive, so that both of them can earn their own fair share of revenue. However, because the power was on particular aspect, for example, the power which was given to the central and state government was on various aspects. So be it the manufacturing activity, be it the sales activity, correct? So this power was mutually exclusive. So if the goods were manufactured, the power was with the central government, and when the goods were sold, the power was with the state government. At the same time, in the initial days, the concept of service was not there, correct? However, as the service sector grew in the next couple of decades, then practically the problem which was arising was that whether something is goods or whether something is service. For example, if you are buying a CD, certainly you will say it's goods transaction. But what if that's a song, the same song you are streaming on the internet? Will you call it as a service? Or again, you are going to call it as a goods only because the song or bits are being downloaded, correct? So these kind of interesting questions started coming to the government, and therein it became very difficult for the government to manage whether something is goods or whether something is service. Because if you say goods, the state government will get tax. If it is service, the central government will get tax. And both the state and center were fighting, and even the taxpayers were fighting among with both the authorities. And that's the reason, friend, we thought now it is a right time in 2016-17. We thought that let us amend the constitution by way of 101st Constitutional Amendment Act and introduce GST. Friends, the 101st Constitutional Act, I think all of you are aware, had around 20 clauses. Clause 1 to 17 inserted, amended, and deleted various provisions in the constitution, but at the same time there were 3 important clauses which deals with other aspects. For example, clause 18 dealt with the compensation to states. And I think all of you are aware that right now this is being the most debated topic, how much compensation the state government should get. But friend, this clause 18 which talks about compensation to state, this clause is right now not part of the constitution. It was part of the 101st Constitutional Amendment Act. But this 18, 19 and 20, these 3 clauses, right now if you go through any constitution book, you will not be able to find these 3 clauses. But does it mean that these clauses are right now not applicable? Friends, certainly not. These clauses are certainly applicable because they are forming part of the 101st Constitutional Amendment Act. After this Constitutional Amendment Act was passed, I think all of you are aware right now that after this act was passed, we had this Article 246A, which we are going to discuss in the next couple of slides. But at the same time, the power to levy a duty of excise now was curtailed, and it was limited to only 6 products. That is petroleum products and tobacco. That is 5 petroleum product and 1 tobacco product. At the same time, the state government also retained the power to levy a VAT on petroleum product and on alcoholic liquor for human consumption. So friends, all of you will say, okay, no problem. Only 3 to 4 products are outside the ambit of GST. That is petroleum, alcohol, tobacco, and electricity. So is it that important for us to discuss? Friends, why it is important to understand that these 4 products actually are referred, these 4 products are referred as basically pet product of any state or central government. Why? Because from these 4 products, that is petroleum, alcohol, tobacco and electricity, actually the government is able to generate more than 50% of their tax revenue. And that's the reason right now, although only 4 products appear to be outside the ambit of GST, still from taxation perspective, more than 50% of the revenue one can say is right now outside the ambit of GST. And we will discuss about the same, but in the next couple of slides. Friends, as we said that after Constitution, this 101st Constitutional Amendment Act was passed, the power then was with the central and state government both. And this power was given by a very special article called as Article 246A. And what this article said, let us read. This article talked about the fact that notwithstanding anything contained under Article 246 and 254, the Parliament and subject to clause 2 legislature of every state will have power to make laws. Now please note, the language is not to levy taxes, it says power to make laws, and then it says with respect to, that it is saying in relation to or with respect to GST, correct? So the power is coming from Article 246A. And what is the power? The power is basically power to make laws with respect to GST. Now please note friend, the term with respect to means it is a very wider term. The government is not using the power to make laws of GST. They are not using the word of, they are rather using the word make laws with respect to, that is in relation to GST. If there is anything you need to do, then you can make a law with respect to that. Friends, I think all of you are aware, and as rightly pointed out by even Pandey sir, that fake invoicing is one of the big menace which India is facing right now. So many a time one can always will say that GST is applicable on supply of goods, but in case of fake invoicing, there is no supply which is taking place. So can a central government or state government have any penal provision on these kind of transactions? So the answer is yes, because the power which is given under Article 246A is not only for GST, but it is with respect to GST. That is, it is in relation to GST, and that's the reason even with respect to fake invoicing, you can have certain appropriate provision or penal consequences. So friend, let us move ahead. What the provision says, we'll have power to make laws with respect to GST, and that's the reason right now we need to understand what is meant by GST, that is goods and services tax. Friends, the term goods and services tax is defined under Article 366(12)(a), and how it has been defined? It is defined in an exhaustive manner. It says goods and service tax means, it is not includes, correct? It says it means, that is, it has a very specific meaning. And what it is means any tax on supply. Friends, please note, the government is saying that it means a tax on supply. That means the transaction which we are talking about, the taxable event which we are talking about here is a taxable event called as supply. So unless and until the tax is on supply, you cannot call it as a GST tax, correct? That is, you cannot call it as GST. Additionally, friends, please note, it's a tax on supply of what? It is a tax on supply of goods or service or both. And we are going to discuss what is meant by goods, what is meant by service, and what is meant by both, correct? And it then says, except taxes on supply of alcoholic liquor for human consumption. So what is the entire meaning of this particular definition? It means that alcoholic liquor for human consumption are right now outside the ambit of GST. Then you will say even petroleum products are outside. But friends, please note, petroleum products are outside for a temporary period. When the GST Council decide they want to bring even petroleum product under GST, they can do it constitutionally. But as far as alcoholic liquor for human consumption is concerned, that is permanently outside the ambit of GST unless and until you amend even the constitution. And that is one important aspect which we need to keep in mind. Now, let us go back to the definition. It says it means any tax on supply. Now, friends, the most important part is the term supply. Now, please note, as far as the term supply is concerned, the term supply is not defined in the Constitution of India. The term supply for the very first time is defined in the GST Act itself under Section 7, and which we'll be discussing in the next couple of trainings, or next couple of by the other speaker, it will be covered. So friends, please note, we are using the term supply in the Constitution, but we are not defining it. That is one important point to keep in mind. Second, please note all the earlier taxable event, be it manufacture, sale, these terms were heavily debated in the last 70 years. So we expect that even the term supply will be heavily debated in the next couple of decades. Additionally, friends, the GST law as well as the constitution, it is referring to the words goods or service or both. These three words are used in the GST Act. These three words are also used in the constitution. However, when it comes to definitions, only the term goods or service is defined. The term both is not defined neither in the constitution nor under the GST Act. This is one important point which you need to keep in mind. And why we need to keep that point in mind? Because many a time when we are discussing about the definition of goods or services, people say that the term goods, which was already defined in the constitution under Article 366(12), is in a very broad term, because it says goods includes all material commodities and articles. Whereas when it comes to services, the term service right now is defined under the constitution under Article 366(26)(a), and it says service means anything other than goods. So many a time people say it's a very wide definition, and even land will get covered under the term services. But friends, please note, the term service has been defined in an exhaustive manner. It is not in an inclusive manner. What it means? It means, so they are not saying service includes, correct? They are saying service means. That is one important thing. Second, it says anything other than goods. And why this definition was drafted in this manner, in a very broad manner? Because the person who was drafting the definition, he referred to earlier judgments, I think. Because I think in the last 70 years, there are quite a few judgments wherein all the time the sales tax authorities went to a particular taxpayer and they said that this transaction is a transaction of goods. Almost every time the taxpayer took a position that it is a transaction of service. For example, in the case of Gannon Dunkerley, when state authority said that we want to tax this transaction of works contract, the taxpayer took a position, it is not supply of goods, it is not sale of goods, it is rather a transaction of service. When in case of other judgment, be it ITC, when the tax authority said that it is sale of food which is happening or taking place in the restaurant, the tax payer said no, we are supplying service of serving food, correct? Similarly, when it came to renting of certain vehicles, there in case of AV Mayappan, the taxpayer said it is not sale of goods, but it is rather service which is being given of renting by the taxpayer. And that's the reason, because almost in all the judgments you will be able to find that every time the taxpayer was asked to pay a sale tax, the taxpayer took a position that it is a transaction of provision of service. And that's the reason the person who was drafting the definition, he said that service means anything other than goods. So the time you are going to say that my transaction is not a goods transaction, then naturally the department is going to say it is a service transaction and it would be subjected to GST. But friends, please note, it doesn't mean that everything under the sun is going to be a service transaction. What it only means that if somebody is going to take a position that this is not a pure goods transaction, then practically the government can say that it's a service transaction. But it doesn't mean that even land will get covered under the definition of service, correct? And if that is the intention of the government, even when the GST law was introduced in the Constitutional Amendment Act, Constitutional Amendment Bill, in the GST Act, nowhere ever, never ever the government referred to the term service and said that land is included in the definition of service. There is no deeming fiction which is provided. And given that, friend, in our view, one cannot say that the land, or even to that matter, land development rights are covered under the ambit of service. We also need to keep in mind, friend, even under the earlier law, there were various deeming fictions which were there. Take example of manufacture. There was a concept of deemed manufacture under excise. There was a concept of deemed sale under the constitution itself under Article 366(29)(a). Even under the service tax law, under section 66C, there was a concept of declared services. However, under the GST law, there is no concept of deemed supply. There is only a concept of supply that we need to keep in mind. Additionally, nothing right now is deemed as a service. And that's the reason we are saying, friend, that service definition is certainly wide, but it is not wide to include each and everything. It is going to have certain limitation, because nowhere ever the intention that it is going to include land or any other land development rights is specified in the Constitutional Amendment Act, or for that matter even under the GST law. So let's proceed, friends. Friends, as we discussed that the power to levy taxes on a particular transaction which is taking place in the particular state is available with the central government and state government. That is, if the transaction is intra-state transaction, the central government and state government will levy taxes on that particular transaction known as CGST and HGST. But the next question would be, what if the transaction is interstate? Correct? Friends, please note, if the transaction is interstate, then practically the power is available only with the central government by way of levying IGST, and that power originates from Article 269A. Friends, when you will read Article 269A, there are few important aspects which you need to keep in mind. Article 269A reads as, GST on supplies in the course of interstate trade or commerce shall be levied and collected by Government of India. That is one important aspect. That is, the power is only available with the Government of India. Second, this Article 269A has an explanation, and this explanation says, for the purpose of this clause, supply of goods or service or both in the course of import shall be deemed to be supply in the course of interstate trade or commerce. Means a import transaction is deemed to be a transaction which is in the course of interstate trade or commerce. That means on import you can levy IGST. But friends, please note, the explanation is only limited. It is only limited for the purpose of import. It is not applicable for exports, and that's the reason somebody can take a position that export transactions are not covered under Article 269A, and you cannot levy IGST on export transaction. That is one important aspect we need to keep in mind. Second or third aspect which you need to keep in mind, friends, when it comes to Article 269A or Article 246A, there is a specific mention about interstate as a word, but in the entire constitution there is no word referred as intrastate. The word intrastate is not at all referred in the constitution, but only word interstate is referred. That is another important point which you need to keep in mind. Additionally, friends, please note that in the transaction which are in the course of interstate trade can only be subjected to IGST. Correct? What if a particular transaction is happening from India to say China, or India to say USA or UK? In this case, the question would be whether Article 269A can be applicable. Can you levy IGST on that transaction? Why? Because this power is only with respect to interstate transaction. Right now, the example which we have given is an example of inter-country transaction. Correct? And that's the reason, friend, people are saying now under Article 269A, few people can take a position that Article 269A do not empower the government to levy IGST on inter-country transaction, because the term state which is used in this article is defined under Article 366(26)(b), and the word state will not include another country. That is one important point which we need to keep in mind. Friends, I think if you are reading regularly on GST, you would have come across one important judgment in the case of delivered by the Gujarat High Court in the case of material recycling. And in that particular judgment, section 13 subclause 8 of IGST law was challenged. And in that context, the basically challenge was with respect to the intermediary services and whether IGST can be levied on intermediary services. Friends, in this regard, please note that under Article 269A subclause 5, the provision reads as, Parliament by law formulate the principles of determining place of supply. Correct? So the Parliament has power to determine, or the power is with respect to formulate the principles for determining place of supply. This is one important question which you need to ask when you are reading Article 269A subclause 5. Why we are highlighting this particular point? Because in case of intermediary services, I think all of you are aware that section 13 subclause 8 says that the place of supply of intermediary services would be location of supplier. That means under section 13 subclause 8, the government is directly determining the place of supply for intermediary services, whereas the subclause 5 is only giving power. This power is only to formulate the principles for determining place of supply. You cannot directly determine the place of supply under subclause 5. That is what we believe, and that's the reason, friends, we understand that this debate whether GST or IGST can be charged on intermediary services is going to get heat up in days to come. Certainly, it is not the final judgment which you are going to get, that is the material recycling judgment. And in days to come, certainly this question would regularly be raised in the court of law as to whether the government has power to levy IGST on intermediary services. Friends, let us proceed now and understand few other important articles. Friends, under Article 245, the government has power to make laws. The central government has power to make laws with respect to the whole or any part of territory of India, and the state government have power to levy laws with respect to that particular state. Now the question is basically when you are saying that IGST is applicable on intermediary services, the first and foremost question which will come to your mind is basically when the transaction is going to get concluded outside the country, and because GST is a destination based consumption tax, can the government, because of Article 245, get power to make laws for the transaction which are going to get concluded or wherein the goods or services going to get consumed outside the country? That is another question which is going to be raised in days to come. So many one of you will say there is a judgment known as GVK industry, wherein it has already been said that if the taxable event occurs within the country, then practically the power is available with the government. But friends, in this regard, please note that GVK judgment is in the context of income tax law. Under the income tax law, there are two principles. One is known as residency principle and another is known as source principle. However, when it comes to GST law, there is only one principle. Article after Article 246A, 269A, the next most important article in the Constitution is Article 279A. And what this article is, basically this article talks about the GST Council. There are a few important points which we need to keep in mind when it comes to GST Council. There are around 11 subclauses under Article 279A. The third subclause talks about that there would be appointment of a vice chairperson under the GST Council. Friends, it has been more than 3.5 years. Even after more than 3.5 years, right now also there is no vice chairperson which is being appointed under the GST Council. So while the GST Council will always regularly say that the taxpayer should do compliances appropriately or within time, it is a bit surprising that even after 3.5 years, this particular post, which was to be filled by the state people, by coming all the state people together, unfortunately this state, that is vice chairperson's post, is yet to be filled, and because of that certainly practical challenges would be there for the states. So at the earliest the states should come together and fill this post. Friends, then the next important subclause which is there under Article 279A is the power to make recommendations. Friends, please note that the language of subclause 4 is that the GST Council shall make recommendation, correct? That means the power is given, but the power is given, that is the power to recommendation is given only on certain specified subject or only on certain specified topics. And what are the subject topics or areas? These are specified by way of subclauses. And what it reads as, if you read subclause 4, it says shall make recommendations on the goods or services that may be subjected to or exempted from GST. That means the GST Council has power to make recommendation, but the power to make recommendation is only with respect to the object which are specified in the next subclauses. And one of the point you would be able to understand is the GST Council has only power to tax or exempt something if that transaction qualifies as goods or services, correct? And why we are trying to highlight this point, because friends, please note, when it comes to land, as we discussed, land is included in the calculation of builder, and then 1/3 deduction is being given. But friends, the recommendation power, correct? Because GST Council has recommended 5% or 1% GST on the under construction flat. But please note, the power to give recommendation is only on goods or services. It is not with respect to land, correct? And that's the reason one can always say, can you subject to or exempt? Can you subject to or exempt something which is not qualifying as goods or services? That is one important point which you need to keep in mind. Second important thing is, as we said, that the GST Council has power to make a recommendation, and this recommendation word, if you do a detailed search, you'll be able to understand It is appearing for 12 times in the IGST Act. It is appearing 27 times in the GST rules, and it is appearing more than 59 times under the GST Act. One can say that nothing can happen under the GST law unless and until the GST Council recommends about the same. That means GST Act में बिना council के recommendation के एक पत्ता भी नहीं हिल सकता. That is one can always say, and that's the reason I think almost in all the provision, be it section 5, 6, 7, 9, everywhere you will be able to spot this word recommendation, and that itself highlights that for each and everything practical there has to be an appropriate recommendation of the GST Council. Then only the provisions can be amended under the GST Act. But at the same time, friends, please note that the power which is given to the GST Council is to make recommendation. These recommendations need to be in line with the Constitution of India. They cannot exceed the constitutional ambit. At the same time, the recommendation needs to be as per, or they should be uniform, or they should be under the proper act, correct? They cannot exceed the mandate which is being given act. If they want to exceed, they need to first amend the act, and then only they can make such kind of recommendation. Friend, additionally, we need to keep in mind that all the recommendations which GST Council is making, these recommendations cannot violate the fundamental rights of the citizens of the country. And why we are highlighting this particular point? Because friends, I think all of you are aware that on 1st of April 2019, by way of notification 3/2019, there was a new change which was proposed for the builders. And under the said change, it was said that 5% tax would be applicable for all the projects which are ongoing projects if the builder chooses so, or 5% would be applicable for all the new projects. Now what happened if there is an ongoing project which is there? If I have purchased a particular property in that particular building, and I have paid GST at the rate of 12%, because before 1st April 2019, the rate of GST was 12% with input tax credit. Now, if after 1st April, the government is reducing the tax rate and saying 5% without credit, if my brother wants to buy the flat in the same property, can somebody take a position? Can somebody say, on the same property, you cannot levy two taxes, because for the flats which are sold earlier, you are charging 12%, and the flats which are being sold subsequently, you are charging 5% only. So it's practical a discrimination. Additionally, it's a discrimination between existing and new projects as well. And that's the reason, friends, please note, all the recommendations which are being given by the GST Council, it is possible that in days to come, all these recommendations would be challenged in the high courts by way of writ petition. And even if a show cause notice or anything is served, taxpayers are going to take all these kind of argument to argue that the recommendation which was made by the GST Council was itself null and void. Friends, additionally, if you look at article subclause that is 279A subclause 4 subclause D, it talks about the fact that recommendation can be made by the GST Council on the threshold limit of turnover below which goods and services may be exempted from GST. In this regard, friends, please note, right now all of you are aware as a participant of beginner course that there is a separate threshold for goods under the GST law, that is 40 lakh, and there is a separate threshold for services, that is 20 lakh under the GST law. So I have an interesting question for all of you. Tell me whether the GST Council can have two separate thresholds for goods and services. Read this subclause D, correct? Article 279A subclause 4 subclause D. Read it and tell us whether you can have a separate threshold, for goods and services, or you need to have a uniform threshold for goods and services both. So you can highlight this terms, threshold limit. So friend, if you go through the terminology, you'll be able to understand the terminology is threshold limit. It is not threshold limits, correct? That means there can be only one threshold limit for goods and services. The terminology is not goods or services. If you read this statement in its entirety, you will be able to understand that there can be only one threshold limit for goods and services, correct? There cannot be two threshold limits. However, right now there are two threshold limits, and again this is a recommendation which are made by the GST Council. We believe that in days to come, even these kind of recommendations which are made by the GST Council and implemented, they could get challenged on these kind of arguments in the court of law. Additionally, friends, one of the most important subclauses under Article 279A is basically subclause 6. all the decisions or recommendation which are being made by the GST Council, we need to keep in mind that there is a one particular point, that is subclause 6, which mentions that while discharging the functions conferred under this article, the GST Council shall be guided by the need for harmonized structure of GST and for development of a harmonized national market for GST, correct, for goods and services. That means each and every recommendation is likely to get challenged because of this subclause 6. Because even if you are having two separate thresholds, one can always say if there are two thresholds, practically it is in violation of subclause 6, because you are not having harmonized structure for goods and services, because you are saying for goods separate threshold, for services separate threshold. Similarly, there are different dates for filing of returns. So you can always say that are you having a harmonized structure of GST, because you are having different dates, because for some state have different dates or GST compliances, and some other state have different dates. So practically all these questions or recommendation with the GST Council is right now giving. I think in days to come they would be questioned in the court of law. So with this, friend, I think we are through with our discussion on GST Council and related aspect under the Constitution. Friends, let us move ahead now. There are quite a few judgments, because we are also going to discuss some of the important judgment. There were quite a few judgments which we reported in the last couple of days. One of the judgment which catch hold of our eye was this Shiaz judgment, which is a Kerala High Court judgment, wherein the taxpayer approached the High Court and he said that we want to adjudicate, we want to basically raise a particular grievance before the GST Council. And that's the reason they said by way of writ petition that you request the GST Council to take up our issue and then resolve the same. We want to adjudicate this particular issue by the GST Council. However, the High Court said that there is no power, there is no mention which is given under Article 279A, wherein a tax person or taxpayer can approach the High Court and ensure that his recommendation or his issues are being considered by the GST Council. So practically it was said by the High Court, you cannot force the GST Council to have a look at your representations. That is, you can make representations before the GST Council, but you cannot force the GST Council to basically have a look at your recommendation. This is one important aspect which you need to keep in mind. Friend, apart from Article 279A, there are few other important articles which we need to keep in mind. One of the important article is Article 366, wherein there are various definitions which are provided. And one of the most important definition is article which is provided is basically provided under clause 29A, which talks about the concept of deemed sale. I think you are aware that this article 366(29A) is not deleted at present. It is there. It is part of the Constitution. So many a time people say why it is being kept. Friends, please note, it is being kept because the levy of VAT is still there on the petroleum products, correct? And that's the reason, that could be one of the reason. Similarly, we need to keep in mind when you are going to understand the meaning of the term supply under section 7, you'll be able to understand the term supply under section 7 includes the term sale. And that's the reason, friends, people can say or authorities can take a position that the term sale is used in the term supply, and that's where even the term deemed sale might get invoked here. One can always refer to the concept of deemed sale because the term sale is used in the definition of supply. But friends, please note, Article 366(29A) was a deeming fiction, legal fiction, and it was created for entry number 54. And if a particular deeming fiction is created for a particular entry, then that deeming fiction you cannot apply to other entries. For example, Article 246A. So that is one question which is going to be debated in days to come, whether this concept of deemed supply will have its relevance under the GST law or not. So friend, that was with respect to the various articles in the Constitution. Now let us understand what are the recent developments which have taken place in the GST law in the last couple of days, and what are the important judgment in this regard. Friend, after the Constitution was amended by the 101st Act, I think all of you are aware that the entry number 55 in the state list, that is taxes on advertisement, was omitted or deleted. Now friends, please note, this entry was omitted. However, the state government of Mathura, the Mathura Vrindavan Nagar Nigam, they continued to levy taxes on the advertisement. And that's where the taxpayer approached the High Court, and then the High Court struck down this levy, that is Mathura Vrindavan Nagar Nigam, basically Adhiniyam, which was there. They struck down this because they said that after 101st constitutional amendment, there is no power which is given to the state or the local authorities to levy a tax on advertisement, because this entry number 55, which was there under the state list, got omitted or deleted. Additionally, friends, one of the most interesting question which arose before the Kerala High Court was with respect to basically continuation of various assessment which are being undertaken by the state authorities. So the question was that after introduction of GST from 1st of July 2017, whether the state government have power to continue assessment. And why this question was raised? Because under the GST Act, there is one section, that is section 174. This is a clause which is referred as saving clause, correct? So the GST Act repealed the Excise Act, Finance Act, but at the same time, it is saving some of the provisions by way of section 174. But one of the argument which is being taken by the taxpayer is that under the GST Act there is a saving clause, but in the Constitution of India there is no saving clause. That means the constitutional entries are deleted. You amended or deleted certain entries in the Constitution itself without having a saving clause, and that's the reason people or the taxpayers are taking a argument in the court of law that because there is no saving clause in the Constitution, the way it was there by way of Article 277 or 372, this kind of saving clause is not there in the Constitution. You cannot carry out assessment under the GST law. Obviously, this judgment was pronounced, and this judgment was in favor of the tax authorities, and it was said that after introduction of the Constitutional Amendment Bill, what has happened is basically merger of the power, and the power to levy sale tax has got merged with the power to levy GST. That means there is evolution of the powers of the state government. It doesn't mean that the state government cannot do now assessment. So this one judgment, although this judgment was delivered and it's a single bench judgment, I think in days to come, these kind of issues would be now regularly debated in the court of law, wherein if there is any assessment which is being carried out by the state government, the people are going to challenge it, saying that the Constitution does not have any saving provision, and that's the reason the state government cannot carry out any assessment. Friends, additionally, I think all of you would have seen the judgment of Reliance Industries, wherein the state government of Gujarat had retrospectively amended the Gujarat VAT Act, and the Reliance Industries challenged that provision, saying that because there is no Gujarat VAT Act, you cannot carry out the power now retrospectively. Additionally, they said after introduction of Article 246A, there is no power which is there with the government of Gujarat to amend the GVAT law retrospectively. And the Gujarat High Court agreed to that contention, and they said that a section like 84A cannot be introduced by under the Gujarat VAT Act, and that section which was introduced by the Gujarat government was held to be ultra virus the legal competence of the state legislature. So this was one important judgment, friends. I thought that it could be a relevance for all of you. Then, friend, the final point, that is with respect to levy of cess. I think all of you are aware that the matter reached up to Supreme Court in the very first few days of GST in the case of Mohit Mineral, and the question which was posed before the Supreme Court was that after introduction of GST, whether the power to levy cess continues, whether the government has power to levy cess. In this regard, please note, friend, the Supreme Court has said that after introduction of GST, the GST Act or the Constitution doesn't say that henceforth no surcharge or cess shall be levied, and that's the reason the Supreme Court said that the government has power to levy cesses. And why we are highlighting this judgment? Because, friends, in days to come, it is likely that because of Corona or COVID, we might see something known as a health cess in days to come. Obviously, whether it will happen or not, that is a separate question. Friends, we would also have loved to take you through the basic structure theory also, but because of paucity of time, we will not be able to do that. But what we will do now, we will open the floor for question and answer now, because I think we have exceeded the time. We are having around 10 minutes left. What I will do in the next couple of minutes, I will just briefly highlight some of the provisions or point, and then we will take you to the question and answer if there are any. So, friends, we need to keep in mind that as we discussed, that when Constitution was introduced, there was a concept of preamble which was there, And right now, almost in all the judgment, the Supreme Court is regularly referring to the preamble, saying that it is giving us a golden goals, correct, which we need to achieve. And that's the reason. The constitutional provision, whenever they are debated, we can go back to the preamble, refer that, and then we are able to get a clarity. However, we have a question for you. Can we do the same thing for GST? Because when GST law was introduced, there was something known as statement of object and reason. Can we go back to the statement of object and reasons whenever there is any debate on a particular provision? That is something which you need to keep in mind. Friends, additionally, as we discussed, that there is a concept called as basic structure in the Constitution of India. And what is the basic structure? Basically, basic structure theory was propounded in the case of Kesav Nanda Bharati judgment. And this judgment, I would say, is one of the leading judgment on the concept of basic structure theory. And it is said that although Constitution got amended for more than 104 times, correct, and our Constitution is a bit rigid, but at the same time it is flexible also because we are amending it. But the Constitution's soul is right now intact only because of the legal luminary or legend called Nani Palkhiwala ji. Only because of him, the citizens of the country were able to win this judgment, and because of this judgment, we were able to retain the soul of the Constitution. And why we were able to do that? Because the judgment called as Kesav Nanda Bharati judgment, it said that you can amend the Constitution under Article 368, but you cannot deface or you cannot change the entire Constitution. That is, if a person comes to you, you are a doctor, you can do some surgery, correct? You can do some face surgery, you can do some hand related surgery, but you cannot do away with the hand, correct? That means the basic structure of the Constitution will always remain. While you will be in a position to amend the Constitution, you cannot do away with the basic structure of the Constitution. And I think for that, the entire credit goes to Mr. Nani Palkhiwala. Obviously, he is no more longer with us, but it is only because of the work which he had done in the case of Kesav Nanda Bharati judgment that we are able to see the Constitution and its soul being intact. So friends, with this, we are through with our discussion on constitutional provisions. Now we will request the organizers to make the floor open for question and answers.
I request all the participants, if they have any questions, they can type in the chat box so that Mishra ji can then pull up the questions and present to us. Mishra ji, chat box में कोई questions आए होंगे तो जरा प्रीतम जी के लिए दीजिए.
एक क्वेश्चन दे रहा हूं.
हाँ. Pritham ji, really an excellent session, and
thanks.
Yes. Mishra ji will put up the
very vast topic, and with covering it within 1.5 hours is always a challenge. But we hope we are able to do the justice. Yes.
Really. So I think the first question is here. I will read for you. GST for sole proprietor providing online services only to non-resident.
GST for sole proprietor providing online services only to non-resident. See, we are unable to understand the question in its entirety, but I would like to highlight few important points. One is basically when we look at somebody who is providing services to non-resident, one will have to see whether the service qualifies as export or not. Under the IGST Act, I think this question you can park it for the discussion when you are going to discuss IGST Act. Wherein under the IGST Act, if the place of supply is happening outside the India, correct, and if you fulfill all the conditions which are there under section 2 subclause 6 of the IGST Act, then you will be in a position to say that your activity qualifies as export. And if your activity qualifies as export, there may not be any GST which will be leviable on the said transaction. But at the same time, if your activity does not qualify as export, even if it is provided to non-resident, you will have to pay GST at the rate of 18%. Friends, as we discussed, that under Article 245U, read with Article 269A, one can always take a position that if the goods or services are being consumed abroad or outside the country, the GST law itself will not be applicable because there is no power which is given under the Constitution to levy GST on export activity. That is, argument can be taken, but not a very easy argument. I think this argument has to pass through the registry of like say High Court and Supreme Court. Then only one can be very much certain. But one broad level argument I think we have shared with you. Question number 2, as GST is a destination-based tax, can hotel or guest house of Maharashtra provide services for a company in Tamil Nadu? I think the question, although it's not clear, I think somebody is asking, like, say, if you go to Goa, whether the person, that is the Taj Hotel Goa, will charge CGST, HGST, or whether they will be charging you IGST. Friends, again, this is a question with respect to IGST Act. Please note, with respect to immobile property, the place of supply is location of immobile property under Section 12. And that's the reason a person who is providing hotel or accommodation, he will be charging you CGST and HGST. The inherent issue which is here is basically the person, if you go to Goa and you stay there, even for official purposes, you will not be in a position to claim input tax credit. Why you will not be in a position to claim input tax credit? Because practically the credit of CGST and HGST cannot be claimed by you in other state. So that is one point which remains, that because of that, I think to some extent tax cascading continues under the GST law. The third question is, what is GST applicability on agricultural products? Again, I think friends, please note that under the GST law, as far as IGST goods are concerned, on the various products, there are a separate exemption which is being made available. Almost all the major agricultural products are exempted, or at max they are subjected to GST at the rate of 5%. So it is a product level questions. We'll have to go to the rate related notification to understand which products you are talking about. Additionally, please note that if you are talking about services with respect to agricultural products, please note under the GST law, there is a specific exemption available which is given to the farmers, wherein I think many of the critical services, including supply of farm labor, supply of farm equipments, is specifically exempted. So to that extent, I think you can be rest assured that substantial exemption is available for agricultural products and agricultural services. But yes, go through that notification and then only be certain whether that exemption is available to you or not. What about charging of, and what do you need to apply for GST? Okay, see, if you are providing services to which are qualifying as interstate services, I think all of you are aware, the exemption, the threshold exemption will not be applicable. And that's where I think one has to be a bit clear, because that point is not, because the questions are mentioned, but they are not very much clear. I think if you are only providing intrastate services, no issues. You can always claim the 20 lakh rupee threshold exemption which is there. But if it is interstate or you are providing to non-resident, you'll have to charge GST, or if it is applicable, right from rupee 1, or you can claim the benefit of export. I think almost or many of the questions which are being asked, I think they relate to IGST law, or wherein the place of supply is in question. So we'll request the participant to park those questions for the next faculty, because there will be a detailed discussion on place of supply and IGST Act also. I think therein this question would be more than relevant, and I think they should be parked. I would like to ensure that I don't encroach upon other faculties' topic. That's the reason I think it is much better for it to be asked in the subsequent sessions.
Great. So,
yeah. Yes, sir. Please go ahead, sir.
Question number 7. If you can just glance through, if you want to, like, you think it is.
Yes, I am just having a look. With the center not to pay sales as per the device scheme coming on the scheme borrowing. A very interesting question, I would say. See, this is being debated in last couple of months because the central and state kitties, I think, are under severe stress because of Corona or COVID, and the says the government is not able to generate enough revenue to meet the needs of the state. So, friends, when you go back to the Compensation Cess Act also, if you go through the provision, you'll be able to understand the cess was being provided or to be given to the state to compensate for loss which was arising on account of introduction of GST. Right now, what is happening? The loss which is arising is not on account of GST. The loss which is arising to the state and central government is because of COVID or Corona, because of which there is less consumption in the country. So obviously, one can always debate that basic point, that the compensation which was agreed by the central and state government, it was only with respect to the losses which are arising on account of introduction of GST. These losses right now which we are talking about is only because of low consumption in the country because of Corona. So per se, whether the central government is actually liable to make cess payment to the state, whether they are expected to compensate or not, is itself a big question. But if we say that it is not to be debated, then practically yes, the central government is liable to make payment of that cess to the state government as per the original scheme. And yes, if they don't fulfill the obligation which is there, under the 101st Constitutional Amendment Act by way of Article 18, certainly it will be against the principles of the Constitution, and the central government can be dragged in the Supreme Court under Article 131 by the state government if they don't fulfill their duties. So if there is any other question, we can take up that, or I think.
Sure. So I'm really want to thank all the participants, and we can see 325 of them still there, and all the
Yes,
500 odd
thanks.
participants who registered for this program.
Correct.
A big thank you for joining in, and I would also like to place on record the thanks for WRC Treasurer Anand Jakotia and even Manish Gadia and Umesh Sharma for designing
Yes.
such a good program of 2 hours into 5 days, 10 hours, where we are trying to
Correct.
cover the basics of GST once again for everyone, and covering various aspects of it. And so like everyone can take who are interested in indirect tax, or like they got some doubts, they can clarify. And I would also like to thank Rehman ji and Pandey ji for joining us today. And coming to CA Pritam Mahure, Pritam ji, really thank you very much for covering the topic, the first session. Like they say, the opening batsman, if he does the good work, then like the load on the others become much lesser. And you done the opening in such a good manner today, and talking through so many concepts and the basic things for the last 1.5 hours, and also answering the questions so well. We are really grateful, and on behalf of WRC, we thank you. And I also request all the participants to carry out a thank with the applause. And thank you, Pritam ji.
Yes, thank you, thanks.
Yes.
And I think the slides are available because some of the participants messaged me also personally. I think they can download it from the webinar link. And if not, I think they can get in touch with the WRC team. Additionally, I would like to thank Pandey sir. I think he started the session very well by his opening remarks. And also, I would like to thank Rehman sir. He has graced this event by his presence. So thanks. So thanks, Murtaza ji also. Yeah.
Thank you. So
Thank you,
like
thanks.
for all the participants' knowledge, the presentation for each of the days and also the video recording will be uploaded by the events team on the WRC website, and you can download from there. Also the publication which was released today, the virtual CFO, soft copy of that will also be available. And during this term of the current chairman, he has been like very aggressively following up for so many other publications, and all of them are freely available. Soft copies you can download, you can read them, you can print, and there is no cost to it. So that is it. And again, looking forward to see and meet all the participants again tomorrow, so that we continue with the session then. Great.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Yes. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Yes. Mishra ji, happy to close the recording, and we can end the session.
Yes. Thank you, sir. Thanks.